regardless, this seems like it might be a little bit more Cyclone focused from Cure. We see the reactor of the factory going over. No, Hellions again. It's funny because Cure's not a guy we think of as developing the meta. You know, he's a guy that'll play Korean Terran. He'll play the distillation of how Terrans play in Korea, and that's how that's going to happen. And if anything, he's slow to adapt to the meta. And here we see him, it feels like not even adapting, but setting something that might become the meta. This seems really strong against those Cyclone openers. Now, the interesting thing we are seeing here, though, is that Cure is getting more active on the map with his Cyclone Hellion. We saw him active with the Banshees early on, but it was later. It was with more Cyclones. And the question now is how much damage does he get done with this? Ideally, you run the Banshees into one base and you pressure with the Hellion Cyclone on the other. But Maru, he's got at least one tank in the natural. They two-shot Cyclones, that is a bit scary, but there's the other option. We just run Banshees on top of the tanks, and then there's nothing to defend the natural in very quick game.
That's very true. That could be the most potent option, and I'm a little scared for it.
Well,
he has 2 tanks, a Cyclone, and a couple of Ravens and Marines. Like, as long as it wasn't literally the 2 tanks alone, which would have been quite the bad decision. So that's not usually going to be the fear. And Maru's certainly not letting himself open to that vulnerability.
Look at this, though. Maru, yeah, okay, you're going to play this mech Marine style, fine. Maru's opting into factories even quicker than Cure is.
He canceled 2 barracks. He scanned and had barracks on the way, and then he canceled them. You know, Maru might be doing the right thing. I have no idea. I'm not even sure he's 100% confident in it, but Cure has already gotten ahead, and now what Maru might be doing is getting temporarily like ahead in the army, but still overall falling behind because of the economy, right? And then he's playing an almost identical game to his opponent when his opponent has a lead. And that doesn't ever sound very good.
Yeah.
And then in typical TVT, it's a lot of positioning and tank defense that comes, you know, makes those comebacks happen. But if you're not so tank focused, because you're also building Cyclones, is that the way that it goes? Honest question. Maru is now pushing out with his temporary, I think, Cyclone lead. It's about to change. 6 more on the way for Cure, and Cure with a dominant supply overall.
Yeah, it's funny. I looked at this. I'm like, you know what? Factories are faster. He's getting upgrades faster. Like, this should be a good army for Maru. And he's just down 20 army supply as he tries to make this shove happen. And by the way, Banshees are on the other side of the map, and they're getting a ton of damage here. Cure is okay to give this base up. There's a spot on the left side that he can float on over to and move things over. If Maru's able to go and really shove things up and get into the production and put tanks up against the cliff, maybe that gets scary. But Zombie Grub, it feels like these Banshees, I'm not going to say they're ending the game, but they are doing game-defining damage.
Game-defining is a good way to put it, yeah. Maru realizes he can't jump anywhere further. There's no domino falling here, so he pulls back to handle this. I owed, actually, because I checked out the production. I wonder if we just miscounted when the factories went down. Maybe Cure had faster factories already done when Maru was building his and we didn't notice. But at the end of the day, 5 factories for Cure, only 4 for Maru. Generally, I would say that it's just a straight-up mistake, and I'd only be hesitant to say it's not because this is a weird new style of TVT, but Cure is showing us the way, and Cure has 5.
Yeah.
So I dare say Maru made a mistake.
Cure could be getting himself set up for a really nice 2-2 timing. He's just going to have a little bit less bolts to that army, but it's still like 70,000 psych. You can't even bring them all to bear. The arc is not big enough. It's what is this?
Yeah, well, that... again, this was a meta a long time ago. It was very brief, and I don't even remember why it happened, actually. It was like 5 years ago. But it was pretty dumb. And what I think was at least happening back in that meta is that if you did make a successful transition over tanks, over 2 tanks, like 6 tanks, you basically were on your way to the next stage of TVT. Both of you accepted that the Cyclone meta was over, and you went into tanks. This seems to be the difference. Again, compared to a very old, very unknown, no one cares about anymore meta. But it seems to be the difference. And Cure is kind of the one leading the charge here, where he's like, yeah, no, you don't have to move over to tanks. You get 3 to anchor your army, and then you just go, go, go.
It's wild watching this. But the other interesting thing as well is the Liberators, there's nothing to defend this right here. Just siege up right on top, kill as much as possible. Maru's cut a lot of corners to try to come back into this game, because again, the greed was not there early. Cure had that. So his second armory much slower. He's down upgrades on that. He was only 4 factories to try to build other things. And still, Cure is the first one to max out faster, even as Maru tries to go cheaper and other things to find that value. And the one thing I guess I'd like, Cure was really good in that last game of taking the entire map once he had the advantage. He took 4, 5, 6 bases and just massive economy. He's not quite doing that this time.
And it is a very different map. You know, we do have a smaller, more condensed map, I guess I should say, where it quickly becomes claustrophobic. You know, like, I want to take that base. No, I want to take that base. So it's definitely different in that regard. But Cure should still probably be ahead in the command center production, and he is building 1 more. He's already expanded, I guess, over to his 5th. So it is keeping up with that, but then Maru is maybe closer to Cure then in this game than the last one. I also think that Maru moving into more tanks might still be the right call. You know, like, that is still usually the way to do it, but now the tanks aren't as involved for either player. One's interference matrix, the other is out of range. And that's what Cure's, I guess, banking on, is that at any point his cyclones will be involved and the tanks won't. But eventually, the tanks do get on your side of the map, and then there's no more room to micro with the cyclones.
Yeah, Cure's actually in a bit of a rough spot right now as Maru's found his way onto Cure's side of the map, and Cure realizing this, he's got 5 tanks in production, Zombie Grub, as he tries to find some way to swing around, but this base seems doomed to die. Luckily, he pulled the SCVs off earlier, so he's going to be okay there. But these are the mech marines, these are the cyclones, they're so fast, you can run onto the other side of that, force the base trade, but there are tanks sieged up at home. So Maru is doing an incredible job. He's got the siege up on the north side planetary. That's gonna get taken down at some point. He's actually really clawing his way back into this game.
I'm glad that it's not pure cyclone. That's really the way to go.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think eventually you move into tanks, because then the dilemma last game was that you were talking about sky. You're talking about air Terran. So, you know, when you don't do that, when you do stay on the mech, and when you do go into more tanks than cyclones against pure cyclone, yeah, as long as the tanks are sieged, like, that should be good enough. The complicating factor might be if Liberators made an appearance or if Ravens made more of an appearance, but I don't know what Cure's thinking now that he has suddenly this conundrum. He's not the one that's in charge. He's the one on the ropes.
We saw him play. He couldn't break Maru when he had masked both hands on the reins. And now he's the one. Yeah, you're right. Maru, it feels like Maru's gotten to tier 3 evolution. Cure, he evolved faster, but it's a little bit longer to figure that late game out. So I'm not a Pokemon guy.
I was going to say, we need Stelter on the desk.
Stelter, please.
She's going to explain this, great. But it's absolutely awkward. Cure might have gotten here faster, but Maru, I think, has figured out that extra little difference that's going to matter more, especially on, again, one of the more claustrophobic maps. Cure has abandoned ship like that, another base. They're going to try to go for a base trade, but tanks well positioned for Maru back at home or stopping him short of that. You know, Cure does have some tanks of his own, so that if he finally sieges up, he'll be pretty strong, but he's hardly getting the tanks in the right position. Only 3 of them will survive to get that high ground siege. It is effective. It will get Maru's base, but is that enough to make up for all the damage Cure just took?
That's a lot of high energy Ravens as well. He's going to get 2 tanks shut down, 1 just with the auto turret. So you talk about there's 3 tanks, Zombie Grub. They actually don't matter at all. Yeah, it's 21 dead SCVs for Maru, and he's going to get tanks on the backside, because as we all know, Hellbats are the answer to tanks at the end of the day.
Sure.
But the damage is so much more for Maru. He shut down the mining on Cure's 3rd base, he killed the 4th base, I think he might have gotten another planetary as well.
You know, I actually really like it on this map again, because it gets claustrophobic. It's very, you know, like there's like a 1 avenue majorly. So if the Liberators do siege up on a choke, Cyclones will not break through. And I don't think they're going to get us around as easily, maybe, as when Maru tried to move out to the 5th. But is that enough to make up for it? And the way that this game has gone, is Cure going to work with Sky Terran better than Maru did in Game 1?
I don't know. I mean, at the very least, they're equal on bases. The economic divide's not as bad, but that's a bad siege up from the Liberator. And now that means 2 tanks are going to get shut down. This north side base is again going to be denied. This time, well, it's an orbital, so it dies very quickly. And at this point, Maru, he's got that 6 o'clock base. He's found a way finally to get up a base on his opponent to really take advantage of that economic lead. And that means +3 armor, +1 air attack, more Vikings. That slim timing when Maru had no Vikings, really no anti-air but the Cyclones. That window, it's gone. It's not going to come again.
Right, yeah, he's at least getting enough to counteract his opponents. I'm not sure he's totally worried about it. Because remember, Cure also had the option of adding on Vikings in the last game and then said, you know what, why bother? There's more Cyclones. I don't know, but Cure is trying to find some positioning. And in that way, it is pretty cool to watch this, because in some ways it is like watching the tank siege and the Marines run around. So we do have some attempts to break open otherwise very, I guess, one-dimensional potential, which is just Maru pushing him into, you know, a weak point. So the game is kind of stabilized, but Cure is in the deficit. 40 army supply down. His economy is also getting really questionable. He's running out of resources to mine from, even though his SEV count's fine. Although maybe now he's finally opted for some aggression. Maybe he's made some room. Maybe he can lift his orbital and try away with that.
Yeah, and the interesting thing as well here is, well, first of all, we're seeing Maru, he's going to go to the Fusion Core first, right? I don't know if that's going to be battlecruisers this time. It seemed actually really good in that last game.
No, actually, I think it is for lib range first and foremost. Because the battlecruiser transfer is very slow.
Yeah.
So if you have the momentum, I don't think you really want to give that up.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And the Raven lead is the big deal here. So the tanks on the ground, they get shut down. Cure has to defend so much space to keep his bases alive because he is so far behind. That means a Raven is going to shut down a tank or two. Maru can continue to find that position on the map. That being said, though, a minute ago, it was a 40 army supply lead. Now it's just about equal. And yes, Cure is bleeding some tanks time after time. But he's got himself into a fighting... He's got himself into an army that can fight again, I think.
Oh.
It's a little bit weird, right? He's down 2 upgrades as well.
Yeah. I like the Ravens more, right?
Yeah.
And this is, again, so funny, but you can kind of directly compare it to when Bio sometimes decides it's not going to play the air game. It's going to continue with the mobility game, and it goes into Marine Raven. I feel like, you know, Maru would be practiced with that. It's just exchange Raven Marines for Cyclones. And the Ravens are so effective at adding in with the mobility. But then also adding in the Liberators, I think, is a real power punch. You know, Maru comes in with the Liberators, sieges up after he gets a Cyclone push. That's going to be really brutal.
The supplies are good, but the value of that army is not nearly as good as what Maru had in a similar state.
That's such a big resource loss difference, and it just doesn't feel like that's what we're seeing, you know? Like, Cure wasn't far ahead on the income, so the resource loss should hurt him, you know, in a huge way. But then maybe he was at a different points and we just didn't really track it all that well. Maybe he did have more efficient mining and Maru took too long to spread his SCVs out. You know, Maru has an equal supply, but only 1,000 bank. That's actually not that impressive for a 10,000 resource loss difference.
It's his army is 1,000 gas more expensive, though. That is part of it, but the mineral bank is what you're talking about anyways. So this is, it's fun casting this series because I feel like we're winding our way through a new meta and getting to figure it out, watching the players figure it out as we do as well. But for now, that's a lot of tanks going down here. But Cure, he's got a decent surround from the bottom side. But the Cyclones can't fight. They're stuck behind the tanks. And that means that so much of this army will fall. It's all orange. It's all going down. If you move the Cyclones around the doodad, around the backside, flanking from behind, I think that might be a fight. But they just get stuck behind the tanks. They don't have lock-on range. And suddenly, it's a 50 supply lead for Maru.
I'm really surprised that Cure didn't back up and try and siege the tanks. I think what he thought was that on siege, they still had solid DPS because they do. And if they're in an actual direct fight with a Cyclone, then maybe that's okay. But that obviously wasn't the case. So he had, you know, it obviously started off bad, just to be super clear. It started off terrible. He lost so many tanks to lock-ons, but then his last-ditch attempt to, like, turn things around was, you know, not it, I guess, either. So, all right, Cure gonna try and find his units all over the map to try and buy some time so he can remax, but he's now down 50 supply.
That he is, and he's got a mineral bank. There's not a lot of gas, and let's be real, Zombie Grub, at this stage of the game, minerals are good. They're bought very cheaply. You need the gas to make Cyclones. Not as much as you used to, but you need gas for Cyclones, for Liberator, everything you want to make. This is, it's not even going to be all that nice. I was going to say, hey, you get 5 tanks, but Cure is not splitting his Cyclones, and that means Maru, interesting thing here Cure's doing, he's going up to 3 Reapers, and he's getting Cyclones behind. Generally, 3 Reapers, 4 Hellions, you do something like that.
But it just, you know, and so I think Cure likes the opener on this map, and we are seeing, I believe, that exact same opener, which might just be improved upon, if that's the word you want to use, with more Cyclones.
And this is the Clem build. This is what Clem has been doing in TVT, where you're not going up to 6 Cyclones as quickly, but you get that starport faster, you get the medevac faster, you get damage done with this, and then you build 6 Cyclones and have fun with that one. So the question now, we saw Clem annihilate Gumiho with this build in game 2, the actual real game, or I guess game 3, whatever you want to talk about it, just crazy micro all over the place. Question now, can Cure do that? Can he find that value that the Clem build requires?
Yeah, I actually feel like it's doing a disservice to Cure for calling it that, because I actually remember talking to Clem and being like, did you see that Cure game? What did you think about the Cyclones? So I actually think that this is the Cure build, if anything. It's just that Clem has popularized it so much more because he also does so much damage with it, and he plays in so many open cups. I think. I'm not even sure. You have to ask the guys, I guess.
The liquid Terran.
There you go.
There
The
we
Team
go.
Liquid TVT opener. That's perfect. But anyway, I do think that Cure has a great understanding of how the tempo works with this, but then Clem probably is the better microer. And Maru has already shut down the very aggressive version of this by building a bunker. It gets massively more complicated to work around the bunker with this opener compared to the defenseless, quote-unquote, natural, where there's only a tank. Cure might still try, but we'll see.
I mean, he does actually have a better lock-on on the Cyclones like that, so better trade to the start here, but that auto-turret zombie grub says no. And in fact, he doesn't get out of here, everything's gonna die.
But he did lose a Raven, Maru that is.
Oh, true.
Yeah, Maru lost a Raven in that defense, so that's something to at least trade with. I think overall, that is still favorable for Maru directly. Maru, we know how good he is with this composition. Things get a little more digestible at the very least, easier to explain, because it really is going back into the normal TVT. The Cyclones still play a part, of course, for Cure. That's a lot of map control given to him, but it all depends on the micro. And if we get to a point where it's 30 Marines, 5 tanks, medevacs, then I'm not sure it'll matter. He's going to go for it. He's going to break through the bunker after interference matrixing the tanks, throw down the auto turrets, and then try and use the lock-ons for Cyclone to win out against Marines. But I think that's too many Marines, and the tank wasn't destroyed. So it was coming out of the interference matrix.
I don't think that ever had a chance of winning the game and just totally breaking Maru right there, but it knocks the bunker down. It got a Raven. Like, all those things are really nice. And what he's doing right now, this is a TVP. These Cyclones are stalkers dealing against a 2-base push. Granted, Maru does have a third, but his 1-1's faster, his combat shields, his stim, all of those things are faster. The Cyclones are stalkers buying time for Cure to go and find his opportunity and get his own upgrades up and secure that position on the third better. So Maru, he should be fine here. I love how active Cure's being with these Cyclones. Their time should be done. You only have 2 of them, not 6, but he's finding value. He's killing Marines and shutting things down, and maybe, okay, they're probably mostly dead now, but finding as much value as possible with these units that at this point, they shouldn't get that much done anymore. They're not great.
Yeah, that was definitely good use of the Cyclones. A little bit of scouting, too, in case there was a little hit squad to the left or something along those lines is always nice. Cure is on the defensive. Maru takes his kind of rightful place, at least for now, being on the aggression, but they are really quite similar now at this point.
And we talk about map control. We talk about what Maru's been able to get out of that. His 4th base is a lot faster. It's going on to location right now. So economically, it's not a big deal, but it is, again, another thing that is putting Maru in a marginally better position in this game, as long as he defends this push.
Yeah, the pendulum's kind of swinging back, though. Now Cure is the one on the map trying to find Maru in the wrong position while he grabs his 4th, which really overall not too far behind Maru's. 2-2 also looks pretty much identical. +1 weapon's going to finish for the vehicles for Maru a bit faster, but you can tell that neither one of them are that eager to really pull the trigger. They realize that the armies are quite similar. Defensive positioning might be winning, of course. Usually it does, but the interference matrix, that's the question mark. You're still having those Ravens involved, and a single medevac drop is going to try and catch Maru off guard. Very unsuccessful.
I love that. Just the random missile turret at the front of your base. Supply depot as well, just for vision. But this is going to be an opportunity from Cure right now. The tanks are going to get shut down, a couple on siege, but they die anyways. And this is a great opening for a fight from Cure, but still, moving those tanks forward, especially as Maru starts to get the re-siege. There were like 3 or 4 shutdowns remaining in that Raven count, but the Viking number for Maru makes that very hard to take advantage of.
Exactly. He was potentially going to run out of scans, so he wouldn't have any high ground vision. Also, when tanks fire into planetary, you do have to manually unfire the planetary if you take a fight. It's very annoying. So I think Cure is the wise thing and pulls back. Maru on the defensive is often where we do see Maru thrive, though. He is so good in these positions, and he's going to move over into the starports as well. We still have a lot of hope for him to bring back this game, bring back the control, and another attempt to send those Marines out as well is exactly what he needs. The Marines to kind of stick the knife in where Cure is not looking. Now, that's not usually on top of a planetary, but if Cure is late to the reaction, it could go down. There's a little spready, and he is late to the reaction, so it 100% is going to go down.
Yeah, especially now, we're not at building armor, we're not high-tech auto-tracking, but hey, if the army of Maru's on the other side of the map, maybe I can get more. So for now, that base, it's going to get dead to the tanks, not the Marines. It dies slower. But some of these extra bases that Maru's trying to get, They're gonna get canceled pretty quickly. The tanks aren't sieged though, and Maru finds more. Bases have to get lifted, bases have to run away, but this is 2-2 bio Zombie Grub. They will die very quickly. So the question now, Cure on the other side of the map, can you equalize that damage? Maru's just moving faster.
Neither one of them are on top of production, though, and that is usually the real clincher. And so with that in mind, they're going to kind of reset here. Cure, unfortunately, does finish that command center, so it gets a cancel. More SCVs going down, but for either side, there's not a whole lot of mining. Now it might come down to the actual army engagement. Cure with a superior SCV count, exact same army count for the most part. And so that's where we might have the decision made for this game. If Maru cannot escape with this army, it's easy telling on how the game's going to go. If he can escape, then there's still something to be said about his potential. But there's the trap. They're surrounded, and the lift has to come in to save anything at all. Only a handful of units. And now Maru's army supply is just straight up lower than Cure's. Does he have enough tanks to hold on? He's got 4 of them. That's not particularly impressive.
Yeah, here's the thing though. Cure, he's on 59 SCVs. Technically, his economy should be better.
Sure.
He has 2 orbitals, right? So he cannot mine nearly as nicely. It's triple orbital for Maru. And this drop at the main base, it's gonna get a tank. I think that was going down. It's gonna get some of these Marines. It's gonna get a couple Ravens, which are by far the most important unit in this stage of the game, and more SCVs as well. It's not going to keep Cure from Maru's side of the map, but it will transfix that army. It's not moving for the moment.
Definitely made Cure regret not chasing that down, I think, considering that he couldn't make any more moves on this side of the map. He was halted because breaking a 2-base Terran with tanks and Ravens and Vikings is just incredibly difficult to do. So yeah, I would have, hindsight 2020, preferred to take that down. Instead loses a couple of SCVs and a couple of key units that Maru now can maybe take advantage of. He is grabbing more Ravens. It's 2-5. It's about to be 4-5, and actually Cure is still producing. And he's also getting back to a lot of mining. He's moving his command centers over. He's getting those SCVs over to mine. And it is once again about how this engagement is going to go. One player could take an astounding engagement and win. You know, both players have that chance. Or it could be a wash, in which case the better mining player will eventually win, and that is Cure.
Yeah. Vikings positioning well, but here comes Cure. Down the ramp, shuts down 5 tanks. He doesn't have the armor right now, but he's gonna run right on through every single thing, and the tanks will fall. There's one that remains. Maru desperately holding on here, but 88 supply is not enough, and Cure will break the base. 15 more SCVs go down, and at this point, Zombie Grub, the tank count's not there, the upgrade count's not there. What is Maru supposed to do?
Doesn't have a lot to work with, just an extra 7 Vikings. What are they going to do, go across the map and harass? Probably the only thing they can do, and the only thing that would actually be worth anything. So that's exactly where they are heading, hoping to find Cure still out in the map. And, well, that's not going to be the case. Cure is moving back with the majority of his army, wary of potential run-bys and counterattacks and attempted base races, because that's really the last plan that Maru would have to work with. But honestly, a base race wouldn't even work. He doesn't have the tanks. He might have the air control, but with 2 tanks, 2 measly tanks, that ain't going to be enough. Maru will tap out, and Cure will get the 2.